Hi lovely booktubers, I'm Debs. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Reid Stuff. It's Sunday. I like to do my weekly wrap up on a Sunday. So this is what that's going to be. I did a video on Friday that was specifically about Shortyseptember. And the reason I'm doing those on a Friday is because the 30th of September is on a Friday. And I just thought that would be a nice way to round off Shortyseptember. Anyway, I am also taking part in a couple of extra book events, reading events this month. So some of the books I've read have been read with regard to those. The first one that finishes this month is the third quarter of Historathon 2023, and Historathon is the brainchild of Vin at Revenant Reads. Q3, the dates for Q3, which I think I got wrong in last week's video, the dates for Q3 are 1500 to 1820. That's right, I think. I've read a couple of books over the course of the last couple of months. The most recent one I finished for that is this, Black Tudors by Miranda Kaufmann. I'd been really looking forward to this, and it really didn't disappoint. It was great. It's full of really interesting stories about Black people living in England during the Tudor period who were not slaves. Slavery was not something that was countenanced in England in the Tudor period, which I didn't know. There were servants, but these servants weren't owned by whoever they were working for. They were paid. They were free to leave and go and work somewhere else. But this is great. Miranda Kaufmann started this for her PhD thesis, I think, and she was looking at the lives of Black people living in this country until about 1620, I think. This includes all sorts of people doing all sorts of extraordinary things. So there's a chapter in here about a Mauritanian guy who was a diver and was one of the crew that was employed to try and salvage the Mary Rose after it sank off Portsmouth. Yeah, this is obviously a professional. Nobody else was doing that sort of work at the time. He himself was working for an Italian guy, and he was also one of the first people of African descent to appear and give evidence in court in this country. There's another in here who he was working as a servant, and he was ordered by his employer to whip a white guy who had committed some offence that the employer didn't like. But the thought of a Black man whipping a white man in a state, or just outside a stately home in the Tudor period, is just incredible. Um, there are a lot of references to parish records, so there has been quite extensive research done by Maria Kaufmann, who's gone back through parish records, and we're not just talking in cities here, because you could understand that there were probably more black people in places like London or in Plymouth, which was a major port at the time. Um, but there were also ones in the country, in little villages, and parish records show their baptisms, the record of their baptisms, or the record of their marriages, or the record of their deaths. And because there weren't an enormous number of people of African descent in this country, often they were marrying native Brits. And that wasn't frowned upon. That was fine. So I think we've gone backwards since then. It's absolutely fascinating, this book. There's an enormous bibliography at the back, which I always like, and there's some very comprehensive notes to the text in here as well. I mean, one of the things that I didn't realise is there was an embassy from Morocco in London in the 1580s. Who would have thought? Because they were interested in trade. African princes or kings sent their sons to this country to learn English and learn about our way of commerce so they could trade with us. It was all very enlightening. I enjoyed it very much. Um, I could thoroughly recommend this. It's accessible as well. It's written to entice you in, which is always nice. Um, One of the other book events that I decided I wanted to take part in this month was Shaketember, which is reading Shakespeare. This is organised by Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading, and Nicole at A Day of Small Things. And the idea is just to read Shakespeare. They are reading Antony and Cleopatra, Romeo and Juliet, and Richard III. As I was already reading about the Black Tudors, I thought I would start with Richard III, because at the end of that play, that's when the Tudor period started. So I'm also quite interested in Richard III. I think he might have had a bit of a raw deal, and certainly when you read the Shakespeare play, Shakespeare is writing at a time when the people who deposed Richard III and killed him, the family that did that, are on the throne. And I'm really interested in how history is written, by whom and for whom. And so I've wanted to read Richard III for quite a long time to see the spin that's put on it. And there is a spin. Obviously, you can't say in the reign of Henry VII or Henry VIII that Richard III was the best thing since sliced bread. On the other hand, Shakespeare was responsible for portraying him as a vicious, deformed guy who killed his nephews, the princes in the Tower. I enjoyed reading Richard III. I haven't read a huge amount of Shakespeare, but I've read enough. So, buoyed up by reading Richard III, I thought I'd have a go at Romeo and Juliet. Now, I'm still midway through that, and I'm not really enjoying it as much. We've got past about, I'm almost at the end of Act 2. So, in the first act, you have the young menfolk of the Montagues and the Capulets just deliberately goading each other as they run through the streets, and fights ensuing. And it, I mean, they'd get an asbo these days. The prince has decreed that they shall fight no longer, or they shall be banished or severely punished. We've had the famous balcony scene. Um, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling it, so I've put it aside for the time being. I might try and read something else. Um, I don't know that I want to read Antony and Cleopatra, to be honest, but I might read something else. The version I'm reading from is an electronic complete works of Shakespeare, so I've got it all there to choose from. I'd like to read some more. I'd like to finish Romeo and Juliet. Not sure it's going to happen. Um, the third event I'm taking part in this September is a new event, and this is created by Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and this is Strayaseptember. Yes, and this is reading Australian authors. So this week I have read a book by Diana Reid. In fact, it was the first book that she wrote, and it is called, why can't I find what it's called? Why can't I remember what it's called? That's not good, is it? It is called Love and Virtue. That's what it's called. Um, and despite the fact that I couldn't remember the title, I really enjoyed it. It's a sort of coming of age novel. It's based in a well-to-do university in Sydney, and most of the students attending are well-to-do from private schools. And then we have our narrator, Michaela, who is there on a sponsorship, and she comes from Canberra, and she experiences various different things through the course of the book, and the majority of the book is about her first year at the university and the relationships she has and the events that happen. It's about love, it's about friendship, it's got a bit of a sting. It's very nicely written. I like Michaela as a narrator. She's a bit quirky and a bit off the rails at times, but she is honest, or you get the impression that she's honest. It's good. It's good, and I enjoyed it. The author is from Sydney. This was her debut novel. I would certainly, I think she's written one more since then, maybe two. I would certainly like to read more from Diana Reid, which I may well do, but not just yet. I struggled a bit this week in that I've been trying to fit in all these books for these events, and I didn't want to read any of them. I had a couple of days where I just didn't want to read any of them, and I thought, well, you don't have to. It occurred to me that I put pressure on myself to read what I think I ought to read, and sometimes I just want to have a bit of fun. And so I ditched all the events at the end of this week, and I read this for no reason other than I wanted to, which I think is the best reason to read a book. The Winter Guest by W.C. Ryan. I've not read any W.C. Ryan before. I enjoyed this. This is historical fiction. It's a whodunit and also a why done it. It's set in January of 1921 in Ireland, in a small village on the Atlantic coast. Our narrator is Tom Harkin, he fought in the First World War and is suffering from shell shock / PTSD. He sees ghosts of fallen soldiers around him. He is physically and mentally not quite stable, but is functioning. And this apparently is based on the experiences of Siegfried Sassoon, who was said to have wandered around London and saw the faces and the dead soldiers he had been in the trenches with around London. This book also deals with the starts of the Troubles in Ireland, which is really interesting and something I don't know very much about. At the beginning of this book, Tom, who is an intelligence officer, secretly an intelligence officer for the IRA, is asked to go to, what's the house called? Kilcogan House, which is the family home of the Prendervilles. He was once engaged to one of the sisters, Maud. There were 2 brothers and 2 sisters, Arthur and Billy. Arthur was killed in the First World War. Tom and Billy were at university together. And then there's Charlotte, who is known as Charlie. Now, Maud is killed. She goes out to her uncle's and for an evening of cards, gets a lift home with some auxiliaries, British policemen sent out to control the Troubles, and their car is ambushed on the way into their stately home. It's an IRA attack and everybody in the car is killed except Maud. Maud is unconscious. And the IRA men wrap her up in a blanket to keep her warm and leave her. But 5 minutes later, there's another single gunshot and Maud is killed. So Tom, as the former employee, what's the word I'm looking for? Fiance, not employee. He's a former fiance. And because he knows one of the brothers, is invited to the funeral and he looks into her death. Now, there's some ghostliness, but not a lot. There's a couple of love affairs. There's quite a lot of description about how the IRA was operating in those early days and how oppressive and violent the British were. It's really interesting and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I would read W.C. Ryan again. Also, I've downloaded a couple of ebooks now about the history of the Troubles because I feel I don't know enough about it and I should make myself more aware. The final book was also I want to read this. I have come across a boxed set, a hardback box set of the Chronicles of Narnia. So I thought I would start at the beginning and read The Magician's Nephew. Now, C.S. Lewis didn't write this book first. He wrote it May have been his last one, actually. I think it probably was. I think this was the last one he wrote. Um, but sequentially, in the order of the story, it comes first. So I read it first. Um, it's obviously a reread. I read them all when I was kids. I like this one. It tells about the creation of Narnia, and it involves Diggory and his next door neighbour, Polly. Diggory has been sent to live with his uncle and aunt. His father is in India, and his mother is expected to die and is lying in her sickbed at the uncle and aunt's. The uncle is completely insane and is quite a bad magician, or thinks he is. Um, Diggory and Polly accidentally get themselves stuck in his study. He locks them in and forces them. He's got rings that he's made that he thinks take things to another world. He's tried it with guinea pigs. So he just tries it with Polly, thinks he'd send her off somewhere, and off, poof, off she goes to another world. And Diggory then follows her to try and bring her back. And a whole raft of adventures take place. And during this, they witness the creation of Narnia. It's good. I like it. I liked it as a kid. I like it now. I know C.S. Lewis has been criticised by being overtly Christian. I don't think this is at all. Um, Aslan apparently is meant to represent Jesus Christ. Well, I don't see why he can't just be a big lion, personally. And I will not have people spoiling my memories of my favourite childhood books. So there we go. I like it. I'm going to continue to read the entire box set. And then, because it's a nice boxed hardback set, it's going to go up somewhere high. So I want to read them, basically, to get them off the bookshelves and to enjoy a bit of nostalgia. Anyway, that's been it for this week. Like I say, several Shortyseptember books. Strayaseptember, Shaketember, and Historiathon. I'm beginning to learn now that I don't have to push myself to read all of these things in the events. Nobody expects me to. Nobody is forcing me to. It's not like I'm at school and it's my homework. This is fun. This is fun, and I shall read what I like. At the moment, what I like is to be involved in all of these events, but I don't have to kill myself to try and read every prompt. And I can read some other things along the way. So that's what I've learnt this week. I hope you've all had a lovely weekend. Let me know what you've been reading. If you've been taking part in any of these events, I'd really love to know what you're reading and what you've thought of them. Thank you very, very much for popping by. If you would like to like and subscribe, that would be wonderful. But just generally, thank you for popping by. Leave a comment. We can chat. That would be wonderful. And I shall see you all soon. Thanks for watching.